Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jodie Trembath, and I am the Director of Skills, Employment and Small Business at the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Before we begin, I'd really like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that we're all joining from today. For me, that's the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples. It's a beautiful day here on Ngunnawal and Ngambri country. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present and extend those respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us on this call today. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. We are doing the fifth of our webinars in the Future Makers Toolkit series today, and this one's about working with others. Today's session is part of our broader Future Makers program. That's a program for women in small business, and it's designed to provide practical insights into how to approach working with others in a way that both supports business performance, but also positive and productive relationships with others. So this is just one in a series of webinars that we've been doing. If you haven't checked out our other webinars yet, then you can find them on our website. That's ackie.com.au/futuremakers, along with some awesome materials that you can use to help you solve the problems that your business may be having. And while you're there, why not sign up for the mailing list? And that way you'll never miss an update. In just a moment, I'm going to hand you over to Heidi Cooper, the CEO of Business Chamber Queensland, a very valued member of the Chamber Network and all-round excellent human. And Heidi's going to introduce our expert panelists today and guide today's discussion. I will just say we're really keen to hear your questions. We always learn a lot from the questions that business owners ask, so please add them into the Q&A chat box at any time throughout the webinar, and Heidi will open up for Q&A towards the end. So thank you again for joining us today, whether you're watching this live or later on demand. And with that, I'm very pleased to hand over to Heidi.
Thank you so much, Jodie, and hello and welcome, everyone. As Jodie mentioned, my name is Heidi Cooper. I'm CEO of Business Chamber Queensland. We support businesses every day, businesses just like yours. And one of the things that we see through the work that we do at the Chamber, but also the work that Ackie is doing as part of Future Makers series, is that businesses, and particularly small business owners, are needing more and more support because the complexity of being a business owner just continues to increase. This is the fifth of our Future Makers webinar series, and it's a great way for business owners just like you, those who are either starting a business, growing a business, or thinking differently about their business, to understand the different elements of that business and what it means to be a business owner, to be a leader, to be an employer, to be an entrepreneur, to be a risk taker, to be a financier. There are so many in the series already that have benefited from these sessions. And today's session, we're going to be looking at a really important topic, which is basically about people. And we all know that people is such an important part of our businesses, whether that's you're a sole trader and you're working with partners, or whether you're an employer and you've got employees, but you're working with partners and contractors as well. How we engage with people, when to engage with people, when we need support, when we should be thinking about doing it on our own or in-house, or when we should be outsourcing that. These are really important questions, and then particularly how to manage it from a legislative compliance and legal side. This is a really important topic, and to be honest, it's the number one thing that's raised with us by businesses. They tell us all the time that staffing, working with employees, is their number one issue that they have in their business. That's from a workplace perspective, it's from an engagement perspective, it's from a productivity perspective, and it's also from a performance perspective as well. We're going to be covering off on all of those topics and more today. And as Jodie mentioned, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions at the end. But before we get started, there's just a couple of things that I did want to cover off. First of all, if you would like to use live captions, they are available to you. You just need to click the CC button on your Zoom screen. As I mentioned, there will be a Q&A at the end of this session. So I'll go through a few questions that we know come up regularly from our business members, but please raise questions yourself. One of the things we've talked about a lot in these series is there is no silly question. I can be guaranteed if you've got a question, somebody else does as well. So please take advantage of that opportunity to speak with our experts today, because I know that it will not only be you who benefits from it, it will be others as well. Having said that, we do have an expert panel, which is exceptional, and shortly I will introduce them. But one of the things I do want to make really clear at the beginning of this session is today's session is general advice only. That means that you will hear from experts. We'll cover off major topics, but they are general topics for businesses. And if you have something specific for your business, it's really important that you seek appropriate advice in that area, particularly if you have a legal matter or a matter that's requiring different structural or legal entities as well. This is general information. It's incredibly helpful. It's the issues that we know impact businesses across the board. But if you have a specific question, please seek appropriate advice around that. Now, to introduce our panelists for this topic of working with others. Firstly, I would like to introduce Jody Dunn, who is the founder and principal of HR consultant and at Envisage HR. She brings extensive experience across people management, leadership, recruitment, and workplace culture. Jody works closely with business owners to build strong, values-driven teams and create workplaces where people can truly perform at their best. Thank you so much for joining us, Jody.
Great. Thanks so much, Heidi. I'm really excited to be here.
We're also joined by Praneet Gill, and Praneet is the founder and principal consultant of Cogs to Gears Human Consulting. She partners with business owners and leaders to develop practical, compliant, and forward-looking HR strategies. Praneet brings deep expertise across the full employee life cycle, from hiring, onboarding, through to performance, engagement, and retention. Thank you so much for joining us today, Praneet.
Thank you, Heidi. It's a pleasure to be here.
So the first thing I wanted to start off with is we know that when businesses are either setting up or they're growing, it's really important to know that tipping point of when can you do this on your own compared to when do you need to be bringing in support. Now, we can talk about what those different forms of support are further down the track. But I wanted to start off, Praneet, obviously you do a lot of work with strategy and HR and people capability with businesses. What are the signs that you see when you're talking to business owners and business leaders about needing to bring on more support?
Yeah, so I would say, Heidi, there usually are a few practical signs out there. But before I state those, what I want to say is, and this is the mindset you have when you're listening to this, is that hiring is not just about getting help, but it's really about designing capacity into your business, and capacity in the sense of time and skills. So once you have that mindset and you start looking at other signs, it does make a lot more practical sense. So the first thing that I would say a business owner should really look at is if they themselves are becoming a bottleneck to things moving forward in the business. Because what really happens then is you're limiting the growth of your business by your own personal capacity. So that would be one sign that somebody would really see. The second would be if they see that important work is slipping away. So let's say, for example, there's slower response time to clients. There are missed follow-ups. There is a sales call that came through, but you couldn't actually return that call for 4 days. You've lost that particular lead. So that's another one where the important work is slipping away. The third one I would say is when your business has repeatable work. So if there is a work that can be repeated easily, doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be done exactly the way you want it done, but if it can be repeatable and passed on to somebody else, that is another way to build capacity into your business so that you can then focus on growth. And the fourth and the most important, which is a little more strategic, would be if as a business owner, you see that you're spending a lot of time on low value work and not growth work. Because as a business owner, that's what you should be focusing on, growing your business. So if you look at these four, are you becoming the bottleneck? Is important work slipping away? Is work repeatable enough that it can be handed over to somebody? And are you spending time on low value work? So if you look at these four factors, you pretty much would be able to gauge if it's time to bring somebody else in so that you can have your business go to that next stage of growth.
That's fantastic, Praneet. And I really like that really simple but powerful message around if you're not focused on the growth piece of your business, then that's not the right use of your time as a business owner.
Absolutely.
So I think that focus on as business leaders and business owners, growing the business and spending your time on that, and then bringing in other resources to help you in those other areas it's such an important message. But we also know, and I know, Jody, you and I have spoken about this, that confidence is usually quite a significant issue for business owners, and particularly female business owners. And I've actually been really interested to see how often this theme of confidence or confidence as an inhibitor has come up during this Future Makers series. What I'd like to talk to you about is you do a lot of work with business leaders. I know you're particularly passionate about female business leaders as well.
Yes.
How do you talk to the female business leaders that you work with about getting that mental mind shift around, I'm growing a business, I'm a successful business leader, and now I need to bring in some support to enable me to grow my business and have the confidence to do that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And from my experience myself, I started my business up 15 years ago, and I've been on that journey. But with a lot of the small businesses that I work with, all of a sudden you start being everything to everyone. So you're like, oh, I'll just do the accounts. And, we all love having a wine at 10 o'clock at night, but let's face it, we don't want to be doing it every night or without wine, whatever way it is. So all of a sudden we become everything to everyone. And that's not our niche or our expertise. So when we're not an accounts person, yet we're spending all of our time doing accounts day in, day out, my advice is always to look about your outsourcing techniques as well. You're trying to save money by doing everything yourself. So then it becomes, and I guess Praneet was talking about that bottleneck. So it's realizing a lot of the time the bottleneck's you. And it's you trying to be everything to everyone. And, your vision of what you want. You want to make the $1 million in the first year. That's not realistic. It's around then really being passionate and preparing for that next person that you need to bring into your business. And the key is to not mirror yourself. Don't bring another exact you into your business. You need to look at bringing someone in that has a lot of different skills, personality, work styles to you, so that you can really hit the ground running. And I see that a lot. A lot of people are very scared or feeling really nervous to go that next step, to bring the first person into their business. And a lot of the time it's under crisis, so they don't get to plan. So they're really like, well, I need this person now. Okay, I'm just going to get the cheapest person I can. And what do you think happens then? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in the Q&A, whether you think about bringing someone experienced that you have to pay more money for, or whether you bring, someone inexperienced where you've got to spend a lot of your time developing them. And I think that's a really big key. You've got to be prepared. And I sing the song, Let It Go. That's key. You've got to let it go. I can't sing, but anyway, you've got to let it go. And that's the thing. We want to have control of everything. But when you bring that first person into your business, you have to have that trust and respect straight away. Straight up. If you're like, oh, I don't think I can show them the financials, or I can, not going to work. And that's what happens. So, that to me is the key.
It's so important what you're saying there, Jody. And a lot of what we talk to some of our businesses about, and something I even think of as a business leader as well, is you've got to create space for that person. So you've recognized that you need that support. How do you then create space? Because if you continue to behave and do all the things that you've done previously, there's no space for that person. And the next thing, you're frustrated because you say, well, I brought in this person and the situation hasn't changed. Really important. And the other piece I think that you've touched on there, Jody, that is absolutely critical. And we talk to business owners a lot about this, and business leaders for that matter as well, is you don't want to replicate yourself, but you also need to be really clear on what it is that you are good at compared to what it is that you need to buy in or substitute, which I think is a really good segue. What I wanted to talk with you both about is there are multiple options for how we can resource our businesses. And there's opportunity and risk with all of them. So we can look at hiring employees, we can look at contracting, we can look at consultants, we can look at partners. There's multiple different ways that we can fill that resourcing gap or that opportunity for growth as well. Can you talk a little bit, Praneet, about how it is that businesses think about those alternatives? We'll get into some of the opportunities and risk of each of those alternatives shortly, but as a principle, how should businesses that know they want to grow, they know that they need some resourcing support, what are some of those key indicators, almost even like criteria, that they can think through for those different areas?
Yeah, that's a great question, Heidi. And I would say the most important consideration there is the nature of work. Right. And what I mean by nature of work is this business, is this piece of work something that's going to be ongoing? Is it central to your business? Is it core client focused? Is it core delivery focused activities that you're talking about? Now, if it is something that's really core to your business and ongoing, you probably want to look at something that's like an employment model. So the different models that Heidi, you touched upon are, it could either be employment, which could be casual, part-time, full-time. That's where we would want somebody who's core and ongoing. Then we could have contractors or partnerships. For contractors, I would say if you're really looking at something that's a specialist job, something that's more project based, something that's more outcome focused, or something which you would benefit by bringing in an expert, even if that job is simple, right? But you don't have the expertise. So bring in that expert because it's going to get done quicker and you're going to save money and you're going to save time. And time is money for a business owner. So for those kind of things, you probably look at contracting. I'll probably just put a caveat here. When you actually go in for a contract, one thing that a lot of people miss out is setting strong KRAs and performance metrics. We do that for employees, but we don't do that for our contractors. So I'd say that's something you still consider when you're doing contracting. And the third one, which is very useful, could be partnerships and collaborations. So if there is another business which has complementary expertise, complementary networks wherein you can get referrals from or you can give referrals to, those are the areas wherein you're going for partnerships and collaborations. So these are all three different ways of growing your business, because when we're hiring people, the core of it is you're looking at growth. We're just not looking at additional time.
Yeah, and thank you so much for stepping through those different elements. Jody, I want to go to you next about the importance of setting up those relationships properly. Because regardless of whether we're talking about bringing in an employee, a contractor, or a partner, it's really important that those relationships are set up properly, and there are obviously some compliance elements. And we hear all the time from businesses that one of the most challenging things is managing employees. But equally, we see situations similar to what you've just described, Praneet, where a business has brought on a contractor that's cost a lot of money and hasn't actually delivered what it was supposed to be, and how you manage that. And then the third issue that we actually see a lot of is a little bit like that panic scenario around, I'm going to bring someone in. It's like, I'm going to partner with somebody. It all feels good and wonderful at the beginning, but then the appropriate, MOUs or licensing agreements, or how you're going to deal with IP, that hasn't been agreed up front, and that can be really challenging, and businesses can lose a lot in that situation as well. So the growth opportunity ends up being mitigated by the loss. Can you talk a little bit, Jody, around what are some of the mistakes that people make, and how can they be thinking through this up front so that you don't end up in a situation that unintendedly really inhibits your growth opportunity?
Yeah, thanks so much. I think a lot of the time, particularly in HR, businesses come to us when they're in crisis. So what we're trying to do is go into businesses, I try to do, particularly small, even if you're a sole trader, it doesn't matter. You still need to set your framework up to protect your business and employees. And that is contracts, position descriptions, making sure that there's policies and procedures so that everyone feels safe and stable. If you're even a sole trader, if you're preparing for the growth of your business, start that HR framework pretty quickly, because then people want to work in your business because they feel like they're being supported. If they're coming into your business, I mean, the HR 101, everyone needs a contract. Everyone needs a PD for psychological safety. That's another big discussion that we could go into one other day. But businesses are required, whether you have 1, 10 or 100 employees, to keep your team psychologically safe. So when you're starting a business up, you need to build your HR framework straight away. I see the other biggest mistake I see, Heidi, is that businesses treat each form of their employment terms differently. If you're recruiting a casual or a permanent employee particularly, they should be treated exactly the same. They should all have employment contracts. They should all have position descriptions. If they're doing the same job, there should be the same expectations. But what happens, that mindset is like, oh, they're only a casual. To me, you've got to focus on casuals even more, because they're dipping in and out. They're not really up to date with how your business is moving and shaking. So a lot of the time, businesses make that mistake where they treat casual employees very differently, contractors very differently. And my advice is, please don't do that. Everyone is coming, you're allowing people to work in your business, to align to your vision, to align to your values, to have the work ethic that you need, regardless of what form they're coming in. Even as consultants, external consultants like myself, you know, you need to still set that expectation of what it is for me to come into your business and work with the most vulnerable part of your business, which is your people. So I think that's really, really important. And that's where I see the biggest mistakes, Heidi, that are made. And I really believe that you should also, a great way is to tap into experts. So if you're not a bookkeeper or an accountant, outsource it. You know, just as you're building your business, HR, outsource it for when and how you need it. Same with IT. That seems to be happening more and more. And then you're tapping into other small business owners. And it's a really great experience to have those partnerships. But yes, definitely, please, 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 contracts, position descriptions, policies and procedures, you have to do it. It has to be a priority straight up.
And it's one of
there
those
is a-
things that, you know,
yeah.
you need to start the way that you want to continue, I think is really that message that you've got coming through there,
Yes,
Jody. And regardless
definitely.
of, you know, what the form of employment is, whether it's a contracting arrangement or whether it's a partnership arrangement,
Yep.
you really need to start the way that you want to continue. And Praneet, you gave that great example that
Yep.
we often establish KPIs for our employees, but we don't necessarily do it for our consultants. I think that's really important. And I do also want to just touch on, you know, if you are entering into a partnership, they can be the most rewarding and, you know, outcome driven relationships. But it's also really important that that beginning piece, when everything does feel really good and exciting and you're looking at the opportunity, that you are thinking about how it is that you establish what that relationship looks like going forward and what happens if it's not working out. How are you going to deal with conflict? How are you going to deal with a situation where maybe you're delivering more than your partner is, or your partner's not picking up what you had agreed on? Have that established up front and have a mechanism to deal with that, but importantly also have a structure that allows you to deal with it as well. So,
and I would probably just, sorry.
No, please go on, Praneet.
I just wanted to say, you know, clarity at the start protects the relationship later. So that absolutely should be the baseline when you're hiring your employees, contractors, or partners.
Absolutely. And be clear on what it is that you're doing as well. One of the earlier series that we had, if someone is particularly interested in this side around setting up legal and financial structures that support your business in these areas, one of the things that was really important that we talked about on this webinar was make sure that you know what is yours and what you want to maintain as yours, because you don't want to end up in a situation, particularly in partnership or investment situations, where you end up losing something that's core to you, core to your business, core to your company. So it's really important in those early stages to set that up. Okay, so now let's assume that we know that we need to bring someone in. We've worked out what that looks like. We're really clear on the work they're going to be doing. We also know now that we've got their PD, they've come on board, we've done all of the things that we needed to do to set up front. I wanted to talk about how it is that we then have that high-performing element in employees and in teams. And really, you know, we talked at the beginning about, you know, when you need someone because you need to be able to focus on that growth piece. But how do you ensure that that person that you're bringing in, or people, teams that you have supporting you, that they're lifting, their capability is lifting and the work that they're doing is lifting, so that you do get the outcome that you're looking for? And what do you do if that's not working? And I might start with you, Jody, on that, because I know you've done a lot of cultural-based work and high-performing teams, but could you talk a little bit about that? And then, Praneet, I might come back to you on what does that look like on a practical and even a compliance perspective?
Great, thank you. I love this question. You've got to work out your non-negotiables first. So, for example, is setting up a robust culture important to you from the beginning? Do the employees that you recruit need to align with your values? What does this look like? It's not just about the expertise. Remember, we can always teach someone how to learn and do a task. But if they don't align with your culture and your values from the beginning, I think that's really important. We've already talked about setting up that robust HR framework. That's just so important. That's just a no-brainer. Please do it. And also, you want to start with the mentality of being an employer of choice right from the beginning. Even as a sole trader, you want to attract amazing people to your business. So remember that that also includes not just salary. There's a lot of other things that you can do now to engage and really attract great candidates to your business. And that might be, you might offer another week's leave. It's really about understanding their life journey. And we all go through our journey in life when we have kids, when they're little, we want maybe more time off, or, as you become an empty nester like me. Great stuff. I've got all this time on my hands. So that means that, I want more time. Well, I've got all time in my hands. I want more time off, but I run a business. So anyway, can't have the best of both worlds. But it's really being fair and understanding your people that you bring in. Don't just plonk them in the role either. Your role is to lead. If you don't have those leadership capabilities, grab a mentor, find someone who can really help shape you into a great leader as well. Have those regular touch points. And most importantly, Heidi, you need to, the opportunity that you have as a business where you can, and I don't want to be morbid here, but you can terminate someone, is within probationary period. So what you need to do though is manage that 6 months. So have those touch points, have those conversations. If you can see something shifting, make sure that you have those conversations. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later on as well. But when you're really building your culture, set that in stone from the start. Make sure you ask the questions around your values. Make sure you bring people in that are aligned to your culture, and you're on this journey together. And so that, you'll never shortchange, or you feel shortchanged with then how they're performing. And just don't be, so one other thing I want to say, please don't be unrealistic about the expectations of your team. It's your business. You're the one that, yes, has to work 60, 70 hours a week, but don't expect that with your team. If they come in and they do a great job and they're giving you what you need, please don't be unrealistic about them being as passionate as you. They're not going to be. There might be points where obviously they want to be there and they want to work with you and they want to be success and go on that journey, and setting those healthy boundaries about how you can empower your team. So that's really, really important. Be realistic. If you have someone that clocks off at 5 o'clock, but they do a blooming good job, don't expect them to work another 3 or 4 hours because you do. I think that's important.
So,
Heidi.
thank you. And Praneet, I'm super keen now to talk about how, when you are managing employees and teams, we talked about some of that upfront stuff around, contracts and PDs and those sorts of things. But the reality is day-to-day work is, it's continually evolving, and, we're all, we all wanting high-performing teams. We do want, people to be committed and to be, part of that whole process of, growing the business. What are some of the systems that you can put in place to do that? And what are some of the key areas that you think businesses, like it's almost like, you talked a little about non-negotiables. Once you're into that rhythm of having an employee, what are the areas that you need to be focusing on?
Heidi, I'll probably start with 3 common mistakes that I see people making, right? When they're really trying to set somebody up for high performance. And that probably is going to answer the question of what you should do instead. So one common mistake that I see happening is not setting expectations very clear. And when we say expectations, every employee, take it for granted that every employee and every person who you hire wants to know what is expected, how work should be done, and what are my boundaries. So if you define these very early on, it really helps streamline feedback later. And that's the second one. How do you give feedback? How frequently do you give feedback? Now, I do hear a lot about Gen Z and managing Gen Z. And if there's one tip that I could give on that is, as we look at the younger generation coming into the workforce, one of the things that's really changing for them is feedback and real-time feedback. And I won't get too much into why, but you can actually relate it directly to how they engage with digital content and how quickly they get feedback, right? So that does come into the workplace as well. Feedback becomes really important. You do not let a problem just simmer. And this is a very common mistake I see business owners make, wherein they feel, oh, it'll just go away. That's fine. They'll sort it out. But no, it doesn't sort out. You have to have a very factual discussion about what's happening. And the third one that I'll talk about is understanding the larger picture. Now, Again, everybody wants to be purposeful. They want to contribute to a greater cause. And if you can actually translate your business goals to each employee in your organization and let them see how they are contributing to that larger goal, you actually will motivate them a lot more. And there's research around this, right? Everybody wants to do something meaningful, and that's how you make a job more meaningful, actually. So I think this pretty much also gives you what you should be doing. And I would say that's really core to high performance from my perspective. And that's something I always put in place for my clients.
So that's fantastic, Praneet, and it actually is a really good segue to you. We've kind of worked through this process where we've gone from identifying that we need some support, going through the different options of how we get the resources in, now potentially employed someone or got a contractor in, or a partnership to be working through some of these growth opportunities, but it doesn't always work out. So how, before we get to that, that it's really not working out stage, Jody, how do you coach your clients and the businesses that you work with about how to have those conversations? It's a little bit, this is really a segue from what Praneet was just saying around it's so important to have that real-time feedback. But even if you're doing that and it's not working and you're reaching effectively a difficult conversation point, how do you talk to your clients about engaging in that?
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, and let's face it, as humans, we don't like conflict and we don't want difficult conversation. I mean, there's some people in the world that love it and they thrive on it, but the majority of us don't. So my advice is that not all conversations have to be formal. So if you've got that gut feeling, you've had some of your team members telling you about the performance of behavior of an employee. As Praneet was saying earlier on, you don't just let that go. You need to, but you can start that with a really just great conversation. And it's really putting it back to them to take ownership of how they're going. Are they happy? What can you do to support them? So it doesn't always have to be formal or disciplined, but you start with those conversations. You always follow up the meeting with an email and the next time you're going to catch up again. So you've got it all in writing, because from a HR perspective, when we put our hats on and you ring me in crisis and you say, I have to get rid of this person, I can't work with them anymore. I'm going to say to you, what conversations have you had with them? What formal discussions have you had? Are they within their probationary period? And have you, as a leader, managed or supported them? You have to take ownership of that as well. It's not just one way. Your employees have to feel supported by you to set them up for success. As I said, don't just plonk them in a role and say, okay, you're really experienced, off you go. And then in 3 months' time, they're not performing. You have to take ownership of that support yourself, of someone who's underperforming. You need to just deal with it straight away. It won't go away, because obviously it's niggling there for a reason, because they don't know how to improve that situation, improve their behaviour. You have every right to have a great discussion with them. So from that perspective, remember to, as I was saying earlier on, the probationary period is when you can terminate someone quite at the safest. And as you were saying, Heidi, always should get legal advice or advice from a practitioner who's experienced. But that's the opportunity for you to, I guess that first 6 months is let's give it a go. Let's see if it works. And if it doesn't, you do reserve the right, but you've still got to put in place interim reviews, touch points. You can't just get to the 6-month mark and say, oh, I can't work with this person anymore. They need to go. And that's it. I'm not doing anything. And then when I speak to some businesses, they say, oh, I haven't helped them at all. So you're putting yourself as well in an opportunity for litigation also, let's be honest, because your role is to keep your staff psychologically safe. So take ownership of that as well. Allow the employee to take ownership of their performance and relay that back to them, and then move through that journey. So if you then have to start really going to disciplinary, you've at least had a couple of conversations to really take that ownership of that behaviour or performance from that employee.
Yes, so that's I think that's a great. I was just about to come to you, Praneet, because I'm really keen to hear more from you around what are some of those early warning signs, and what can when you're a busy business owner, and we hear from businesses all the time at the chamber, I was busy doing all of this and I just thought that this was happening. What are some early warning signs, and how do you manage through that?
Yeah. I'll touch upon that, but just wanted to add something to what Jody said. Jody said something so important, which is follow up with an email, right? And it sounds simple, but most often people don't do it because it's too confronting, right? So I'm going to give everybody a tip here, which people have found really useful. The way you handle something like that is, hey, just so that we are on the same page, I am summarizing our discussion below. That's it. So it doesn't look like formal, it doesn't look like it's a warning. And that's a very nice way of documenting. Because if there are top 3 things that are important in performance management, it's document, document, document. That's it, right? So that's very important. Now, going into warning signs, they can be quite loud and visible warning signs of non-performance. It could be something as simple as missed deadlines. Somebody is just not doing the work, right? You've explained it to them a few times, but they're not doing it. Probably it's not a skill issue. There is a motivation issue there. So it helps to kind of dig in. There could be repeated mistakes. There could be tension between 2 team members. That could be a performance issue. People could be avoiding making conversations. Clients are probably receiving different service levels. That could be an issue. Another one is if you as a business owner have to constantly step in to correct things. These are all signs that there is some kind of a performance issue and you're not actually a high performance culture. However, there could also be some really silent signs. There could be an employee who suddenly was quiet. There is an employee who doesn't want to give feedback. Whatever you say is like, yes, okay. So that is actually a very silent way of saying that this particular person is disengaging. Maybe employees stop raising any issues because they're like, oh, nothing's going to be done about this. And that will eventually get them to disengage. So there could be very visible and silent signs. And what I'll just add here, Heidi, is if as a business owner, you notice any of this happening, it doesn't have to be, like Jody said earlier, it doesn't have to be a very formal conversation. It can be a simple, hey, let's go for coffee, really factual. I have observed that off late, you haven't been raising too many issues like you used to. And, the impact that it's having on me is I'm a little worried that you are not engaged enough. Can I please have a chat with you on how we could turn this around? Absolutely factual. The more factual you keep it, the better outcomes of that conversation.
Really good advice. We've transversed the entire process now from thinking about what we're going to do from a resourcing perspective, how to do it, how to manage through it, and what happens if things aren't working. I'm going to go to Q&A in a moment, but one of the things I did want to say is kind of in summary of that conversation is one of the things we know at the Chambers of Commerce across Australia is that the complexity of being a business owner and being an employer is it's continuing to increase, and in fact it's accelerating as well. So a lot of this is there's a lot to think about, and particularly when you're trying to run a business as well. And for many businesses, particularly small to medium-sized businesses, they don't have their own HR support, and so it's often the owner or a business manager who's trying to manage through this. One of the things that everyone should be really aware of is that, for nearly 2 centuries now, Chambers of Commerce have supported employers. That's our core purpose, and it's what we do. So every Chamber of Commerce in your state or territory actually provides a support mechanism for HR and for industrial relations as well. And so our members get support from chambers across Australia. This is incredibly useful resource, and it's something that you should tap into. We're not-for-profit organisations, and we do it because we're here to support employers in the work that they do. The value also of working with chambers is that you have the vast experience of that network, but you also have an opportunity to meet with other businesses who might be experiencing similar things to you and talk to them about different ways of managing things as well. So please, Jody obviously spoke at the beginning about tapping into this Future Makers program, but I would really encourage you to reach out to your Chamber of Commerce in your state or territory, wherever it is that you're coming from, because something that is absolutely core to what we do is supporting businesses to be an employer, and so that HR and IR services are there and they're available to you. So now I might hand over to SK. Would you like to start working through some of the questions we have online? I will flag one of the things that we have been absolutely focused on through this series is we are all business owners. So I assure everyone that we will finish on time today so that you can get back to the important work that it is that you're doing.
Thanks, Heidi. One of the questions is, I'd be interested in hearing your panelists' experiences and advice with regard to virtual assistants, especially when using the services of someone who is in another country.
Great. Is there someone who that falls to naturally? I'm happy to share our experience at the Chamber and working with other businesses.
I'm happy to share my personal experience. Look, it's tricky. What I'd say is there are two ways you can work offshore, right? One is you work through an organization or a company that actually specializes in offshoring. And the second is you go onto websites like Upwork, you hire somebody offshore and you try and work with them. Now, what most often happens is in the latter one, wherein you go through an Upwork, you would face a lot of cultural issues. Every country has their own peculiarities, and that comes into the workplace and the work culture. And that often is the issue in getting work done effectively. So my advice would always be that if you are looking at offshoring, go through a company that actually does offshoring, because they often will help you build that culture gap and will ensure that you get the outcomes that you actually want. And what I would also add to that is it's always good, like if you are Australian and you're an Australian company, go with a company that's based in Australia and helping you offshore, because then they understand those cultural nuances of Australia and how to build it, bridge the gap.
Yeah, really good advice. I'll just add a couple of really quick things to that. Firstly, there are also other ways that you can be using people virtually as well. So we do have members who've thought of different models that they use, and they might be utilising expertise in that is not necessarily located where they're at, but they're using expertise elsewhere, and had really successful outcomes with that. My view on that is it's exactly the same as if you've got an employee sitting in your office, which is you need to set up the same expectations and make sure that you're achieving not only those cultural elements that Praneet spoke about, but then also the actual performance outcomes. But we have had members who've been really successful in that space, mindful though of the risks, obviously, that Praneet did talk about as well. And then the other thing that we actually haven't touched on yet in this conversation, which is really interesting, is obviously the growth of AI and what that's going to mean for businesses and how it is that they can be utilising and really, in some ways, in quite an exponential way, getting effectively resource support by using AI, digitisation and automation as well. I think it's a really important consideration when you are thinking about how it is that you fill a resource gap or a gap in actually getting something done, because this is a really important piece going forward. We did have another session on this that might be worthwhile if anyone's interested in it, but I think what is really important for us as business owners is to think about the opportunity that's coming with AI. There's obviously risk as well, but the opportunity piece and how that intersects with how we think about our workforce and our resourcing and being able to make our businesses more effective and more efficient. SK, thank you. Would you like to move to the next question?
Sure, yes. What are the pros and cons of having an intranet as a source of truth when you have staff?
Jodie, I feel like this is a cultural communication piece. Would you like to jump in on that?
Yes. So sorry, the question was having the internet or not AI?
Intranet.
So, the intranet. Sorry, can you rephrase that?
What are the pros and cons of having an intranet as a source of truth when you have staff?
So source of truth, isn't that lovely? I think it thinks about generations. So think about us now. We've got 5 generations in the workplace. So can you imagine you've got, 15, 16-year-olds working in the workplace and 70, 80-year-olds. So it's about, I would say, setting expectations, standards right from the start for when you are conversing through the intranet. The experience I've had with businesses that use that is that half people take it up, half don't, half go over the top when they're using that. Some people just don't use it at all. And so the messaging gets lost. So I just think it's really mindful I would suggest that you would have a session with your team to work through the pros and cons of that and how you can all, I guess, come to an agreement of setting those expectations moving forward and what the challenges will be so that then everyone embraces it. That would be my
really,
suggestion.
and that's so important.
Yeah.
And it's also,
Yeah.
There's a lot of positives in having an intranet.
Yeah.
And I know that it's something that, you know, even at the Chamber we see as a really important, you know, tool for engagement with our team. But it can't be something that you then say, well, I've done that, and so therefore I don't need to have other forms of engagement. The other piece as well that I would add to that, and I talk a lot even to my team about this, but as well as business owners, is we need to really remember that communication and engagement isn't one way. So it's not just the responsibility of the business owner or the leader, it's also the responsibility of your staff members. And so I constantly say to my team, if you want to know about something, then ask. You know, go and talk to your colleagues, talk to your leaders. Your engagement is as much your responsibility as anybody else's as well. And it's really important that you build that culture in your organisation.
I love that. So good.
SK, your next question, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. My sister and I were thinking about opening a business together, and she had suggested us setting up a trust that would look after both our families. But now I keep hearing all this stuff in the news about trusts, and I don't really get what it's about. But I wonder if I should just pause our business plans for now.
I might jump in and take that one if that's okay, guys. Look, it's a really important question. It's an important question at any time about how you set up your business, and you need appropriate legal advice and financial advice around that. But the reason why you're hearing a lot of it at the moment is because the federal budget was handed down just a couple of weeks ago, and there were quite significant changes in that from a tax and a trust perspective. So the only thing I think we can say in relation to that is if you and your sister are looking at setting up a business, then you should go and see your accountant and talk about what that means and how best to do that.
Definitely.
SK?
There's so many questions here. So
great. Bring it on.
So if I hire a freelancer as a contractor, am I liable for their super? I assume the reason they charge a higher rate than an employee is to cover their super and insurance, etc.
Praneet, you can probably answer that one. If not, I can.
Absolutely, very common one. Look, it's not as straightforward. So if you look at how contractor is defined, there are two definitions. There is one definition of a contractor under Fair Work, and there is another definition of a contractor under the tax laws. So both need to be considered, and the Fair Work is slightly liberal, but the tax laws, they cover super, etc. in more detail. I'm not able to really give concrete advice here because I do need to understand the nature of work and things like that. But one thumb rule would be if the person is truly running their own business, then they are a true contractor. You do need to go through the test though, but that pretty much is the starting point. So if somebody is running their own business, they're not an employee, there's no super that's liable, right? You're basically just paying for their services. But before that, just ensure that they actually are a true contractor.
And obviously, this is also something, you know, I mentioned before, if you are a member of your state or territory chamber, that there is, you can call the chamber and get advice around this. And, you know, I talked about the services that are offered by state chambers. These are your large state-based chambers as opposed to your local chambers. Obviously, your local chambers are really important around that local networking and connection, but some of this more strategic advice, particularly from a HR and an IR, really encourage you to reach out to your state or territory chamber on that. SK?
Yes. Interested in the point about immediate feedback. My team is fully remote, so I only see them if one of us is deliberately making time for that. I'm regularly out on jobs, so I'm not always available to give feedback. Can I adapt your advice to my situation somehow?
Yeah. Did you want to, Jody, you were talking a bit about that real-time feedback. Did you want to jump in?
Great. What a great question. I love the thinking of that. And, you know, I guess as the new laws possibly come in from September the 1st, 2026 around working from home 2 days a week, you know, that might change businesses that don't generally, that everyone does work in the office to even more remotely. So it's about, I've seen businesses make it work really well and some that absolutely don't. And again, using the excuses of, well, I'm not available, I'm out and about and I don't know what they're doing or where they're at. So remember, if we start losing trust within our team, then that's really hard to rebuild. So it's about how do we start with trust and keep trust going, and that's having those touch points. So it sounds like there's a bit of an effort made there, but it's something that you just need to keep consistent. You have your agenda set, you give everyone the opportunity to explain what the challenges are, what's working well and where they need that support. And if you keep that momentum going, you'll then just continue with that trust. If they start not connecting with you or not responding to you, then, that trust is gone. And then it's really, really hard to rebuild that, particularly remotely. And you treat everyone the same equally across whatever site they're at. I think that's really important as well. I'm not sure if I've answered that question. Have I? Have I answered it?
Yeah, I think you're having a great way. But it looks like Praneet's got
Definitely
something that
have.
she'd like to add too.
I'd love to add something more, and
Yeah.
I'll actually
Great.
take the example of one of my bosses in my corporate career, who actually did this really well, and then I'll give a few suggestions. So this boss of mine, he would call me every morning when he's traveling to work. Not just me, actually, the entire team. He would call them just for like a minute, exactly a minute. How are you feeling today? Yeah, all good. Is there anything you're worried about today? And that's it. If there is something that you're worried about, oh, I want to talk to you about this. Okay, I'm free at so and so time. Let's talk about it. So it's more of a pulse check that he used to do. He was the best manager I ever worked with, just because of the way he used to keep a check on his team. So for this particular situation wherein, you're pretty much on the road, maybe you don't have a set schedule, I'm a big fan of putting things down on paper. So if I were in your situation, what I would really put down on paper is, what are those things that my employee or my staff may require feedback on? So actually put it down, give it to your employees, ask them to add on, right? So have this kind of a list for yourself. That will be a trigger point for you. And eventually that list is going to list here, right? It's just going to go into your head. You won't need that paper list anymore. But you will have that as a trigger point and a reference point that when my staff is doing this particular task, I know I need to connect a little more with this particular person. Now that's offline, right? That's more trigger based. You can also have something that's more pattern based. So your job may require you to connect with your employee once a week. There could be another business that might require them to connect once a fortnight, once a month, or once a quarter. Whatever it is, have a rhythm and keep that as a very sacred time and a sacred space, even if it's 10 minutes, even if it's 15 minutes, right? But don't let that time go away. You may reschedule it, but make sure you don't reschedule it for like 2 months at a go. Make sure you get to it the next week, if not the next day. So that would be my only advice here: trigger based and pattern based. So get that into your framework.
Fantastic, thank you. SK, we're getting really tight on time, so we might have a look at the last couple of questions and try and get back to everyone as succinctly as we can.
Sounds good. What happens when you dissolve a partnership? My business partner is wanting to retire in a few years, and I feel like we should start thinking about that now, but not sure where to start.
You need HR help for sure, accountant for sure, but you need HR help as well, is what I would say. And Heidi, I'll let you answer this one.
No, that's okay. I was going to say similar things. So obviously you probably need to go back to how the partnership was established as well. So you might already have some frameworks around how the partnership was established. But if you don't, that's okay as well. I think the fact that you want to start thinking about it and talking about it now is really important. And I often say to business owners, don't ever feel like anything is too late. Like, even as you're listening to this conversation, go, oh, gee, I don't have PDs for my staff, or I haven't established this, or nothing is ever too late. You're better off starting now than saying it's too late and not doing it. So, as Praneet said, I think you need to look at how the partnership was established originally. I obviously don't know your circumstances. You may have had agreements. and they can be verbal or written or whatever it might be. Get some advice as well, and then also open up that conversation, because I think the earlier you start that conversation, the more likely it is that you're going to both end up dissolving the partnership in a way that works for both of you, that's fair and equitable, and ensures that you don't end up in a conflict situation.
You've mostly been talking about contractors or employees or partners, but what about working with really difficult clients because the customer always isn't actually right?
That's the next webinar, is it?
Yeah.
Get new clients.
You
Remember,
need a webinar on that.
you can own it. Like I've done that in my journey. I started my business up 15 years ago, and there were clients that didn't align to my values. Hey, they might have paid lots of money and were about to pay lots of money, but I knew they'd throw me under the bus. I felt it. I didn't have that connection. They didn't align with what my values were, and I just cut it. Like, I think sometimes we've got to go beyond how much money you can make if there's clients that are really difficult and don't align to, how you work as well, because it's your reputation as well. So if you're bringing on clients that have a really bad reputation, then you'll be dragged into that as well. I just
What's
think
really
there's
important as
enough
well, I
clients
think
everywhere.
the principles are exactly the same. It doesn't matter who you're working with in what form. Obviously, there's different legal structures around employees, or you might have a contract that actually sets out those legal requirements. It's often the same with your clients as well. But the principles are all the same. Set up how you want to continue. Make sure you're very clear on expectations. If it's not working, talk early. If that's not working, then start to put in a formal process to manage it. And if you do reach a point that it's not working, as Jody said, be courageous enough to be able to say, well, maybe this isn't the right way for us to be moving forward. But the principles are exactly the same.
I'll add a little to this, and I completely agree with Jody on the values piece, right? You have to work with clients whose values you align with. But I'm going to answer this from the perspective that if your values align, they are a good client, because the bad one has been covered. But you're still having difficulty working with them. What I'd say is, typically, like you would do for an employee, go down to the human nature. That's what I do. I would always go down to the human nature, try and understand their motivations, step into their shoes, and really have a very factual conversation around what is the real problem and how can I help you. One thing that I find really helpful is changing your mindset from this is a difficult client to this client has a problem that I don't understand yet. And when you kind of shift that mindset, our thoughts change, our way of thinking changes. And I personally find that quite helpful. I feel I see my client more human than difficult at that point of time. So that's,
and I think that's ultimately what we're talking about, isn't it? It's the human element here, and how it is that we engage with human beings. I'm really conscious of our time. There is just one more question that I can see that I do want to touch on, because we haven't talked much about professional development, and a person has put up about team being quite young and seeking professional development and not being able to afford it. This is such an important question, but also a differentiator for business owners, but business leaders as a whole as well. Professional development does not necessarily mean paying for something. Professional development is a growth opportunity or experience. So what I'd be talking to your team about is, where do they want to grow? How do they want to develop? And what are those opportunities that you can offer within your organization that may not necessarily cost anything at all, other than time and sharing of expertise? So that can be done in ways like working on a particular project, or working with a new client, or learning a new skill, having a mentor, establishing mentoring relationships. Even they can be peer-to-peer mentoring relationships. We do something at the Chamber internally with my team. We do Coffee Connect, and we randomly pick people across different teams to go and have a conversation about their work and what they're doing. So important topic, and I just wanted to touch on it briefly. We don't have time to go into that in more detail at the moment, but I would encourage the person who put up that question to not necessarily think about paid professional development. That is absolutely one example, but there is also experiential-based professional development. And I'd be sitting down with your team, having that conversation and articulating where the opportunity is, because often I find when I'm talking to businesses, they're providing enormous opportunities to their staff, but because they simply don't articulate it in a way of professional development, they don't realise, but also their staff don't realise, and they don't value it either. Really mindful of time.
Heidi, what you've just spoken about is one of the most famous learning models, which is the 70-20-10 learning model.
Yes.
So anybody who wants to get more information, look up the 70-20-10 learning model. Most organizations in the industry use that, if not all.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So grateful to our panelists. Please join with me in thanking Jody and Praneet. I have to say, every time I've done one of these sessions, the hour just literally disappears. And I could sit there and talk to you guys forever. So thank you so much for taking the time to do that. Thank you also to the business leaders and owners who are online. This is so important, and the Chamber Network is deeply committed to providing these opportunities to business owners and supporting you in either setting up your business or growing your business. This is our purpose. It's what we do, and we're really grateful for you to take the time, but we also want to hear from you about what it is that you're needing and how it is that we can support. We have one more session coming up, so please be sure to look out for that. As I mentioned up front, these are really important topics. We hope that you've benefited from the advice of our expert panel. If you are needing advice, and even some of those questions that did come through the chat today does suggest that there are some people online who do need to seek some advice around their particular business, please do that. Your state chambers are an excellent first point of call on any of these areas, as well as seeking advice from your accountant or your legal advisor as well. Thank you again. Really appreciate everyone being on board today, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you. Bye.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.